And today we're gonna have me, Yanis, and I'm responsible for the loan originator partnerships here at Mintos, and my colleague Dmitry Amelin, who is responsible for the debt collections, explaining to you investors how we go about recoveries, what's our typical process there, and answering any questions you have asked through Slido. So we'll start sharp right now, as expectedly there have been a lot of questions. So as for the agenda, what we will do, we'll start with just a very quick recap of our recovery process. So how we go about the situations where the loan originator is encountering difficulties with transferring payments, how we structure those situations, and how we solve them. Then, as mentioned, there's been a lot of questions on Slido. So what we have done is we have bundled the questions so that we are not just kind of jumping around among different themes. And we'll start with addressing your general questions, which are not case specific. And for that, we aim to dedicate like 15 minutes or so. And then the bread and butter will be the case-specific questions, which we again have bundled by the loan originator so that we are not jumping from one loan originator to another. And we have bundled those questions last night. So if we have sufficient time at the end of the call, we'll jump back right to Slido and cover any remaining questions that are there. So that being said, let's kick this off, and let's start with the recovery process. So Dmitry, perhaps you want to explain us how we go about recoveries at Mintos, and what's the information that the investors can see on the slide on their screens at the moment.
Absolutely, Yanni. Thank you very much for the introduction. Dear ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to you. My name is Dmitry Amelin, and I'm responsible for debt collection management at Mintos. Let me first, before we get to the slide Yanis mentioned and the slide we currently see on your screen at the moment, let me walk you through our approach in that recovery process. First of all, today at Mintos, we have a robust trigger catalog which enables us to move our loan originators, our clients, internally across several zones, and those zones is basically a function of underlying ultimate risk, credit risk associated with each loan. Therefore, at Mintos today we have quite a sophisticated early warning system which enables us to spot problems at the early stage. Recovery process itself actually contains certain stages. There are 4 of them. The first stage, as I mentioned, is the monitoring, together with a broader team of risk management using our triggers. Triggers can be quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative triggers could, just to give you an example, if a law breaches a certain financial covenant, equity to asset ratio, or anything similar to that, or its financial performance deteriorates from the benchmark which we set in our cooperation agreements, then that would impose a early warning sign with respect to that particular law. Or different qualitative triggers. For example, there is unfavorable developments in the market or jurisdiction where a law operates, changes in the management which may pose certain red flags, and so on. So at stage number 1, once again, we closely monitor our loan originators. Stage number 2 is where we already, as I mentioned, had certain triggers or red flags, early warning signs identified. And there we can limit the amount of loans which is available at the platform. We can even stop placing your loans or even suspend a loan originator from Mintos marketplace. Stage number 3 is when we understand that the cash flow that the loan originator generates is not sufficient to honor its obligation under cooperation agreement. In simple words, to repay investments with interest to you, the investors. In this case, we try to assess a situation and to agree on a reasonable repayment terms with loan originators. and to strengthen our position by introducing additional covenants, conditions, thus adding more comfort to you and more robust structure if we're talking about restructuring. There is also a stage number 4 where we take a legal action, which is a litigation, or we are participating in legal proceedings such as bankruptcy or insolvency or anything else. So just to sum up, our recovery process is a catalog, a trigger catalog, a low portfolio segmentation internally, and 4 stages of a recovery process. Now let me turn into a slide which you have on your screen. Let me talk you through what we have here. So on your left column, you can see names of loan originators. Most of those names are known to you. We also see, going to the right, we also see exposure in million euros. We also see a stage from the recovery process at which each law is at the moment at. So, for example, P2 will have a liquidation there, and therefore it is a stage number 4 as the legal action is involved. The level of disclosure is a next column where we basically say to which extent we're ready to disclose the information about current law, about negotiation process, about how we see recoveries. The reason we are dividing into different stages is simply because for certain loan originators where we have reached an agreement and we have agreed on a reasonable repayment terms, we are very happy to share the information with you in full. For example, a loan originator called Credit24 from Kazakhstan. There are loan originators just one below, Tshetka Finance, where loan originator is paying weekly. However, a restructuring agreement has not yet been formalized, not signed, and we're working on that quite closely. And therefore, the stage of disclosure, we call it reasonable. And with a certain loan originators, for example, Capital Service, which is just at the bottom of the left column, we can only have a limited disclosure because we, despite, for example, we are entering into negotiations and trying to agree on reasonable terms, we are concerned with possible information outflow, which may reach a law and may not be used quite in the interest of our negotiations and can also jeopardize potential recoveries to you, the investors. So there are 3 stages of disclosure: full, reasonable, and limited. Expected recovery on each law, where we already understand what to expect, is given in the column in the middle of the slide, while to the right of that, we see the time of recovery. And the last column to the right-hand side is the expected recovery still this year in the 4th quarter. Yanni, please go ahead.
All right, so I think that's a good summary of what we do, and kind of to recap about this disclosure, there are situations where we are in negotiations with the loan originator, and all of the information we disclose to the investors is eventually it reaches the loan originator as well. So I'm rather confident that we have some loan originators participating in the call as well as the investors. So I think that kind of wraps up the part about the process. So let's then proceed with the general questions. So these are the general questions we got on Slido, and these are the most popular or most upvoted questions. And we'll just go one by one and address them. So how is it possible that ID Finance Mexico has pending loans with an average of 118 days and has not been suspended, nor have the credits been put into recovery? So suspension on Mintos is a tool that we use to protect investors where we see that pending payments have kind of formed in a meaningful amount or clear indications they will form. And at the same time, there is no clarity on how these pending payments will be resolved. What's the situation with ID Finance Mexico is that there we have a payment plan agreed, and that will take care of pending payments. And at the same time, we also see that the management of ID Finance is intent on resolving this as soon as possible and then quicker than the kind of at the moment agreed payment plan. What does payback guarantee even mean if nothing happened with the companies that are in recovery for so long? It's like a promise that nobody wants to keep. So I think this refers to the buyback guarantee, and buyback guarantee is essentially an obligation for the loan originator to buy back loans that become 60 days late. And this ability to fulfill this obligation depends obviously a lot on the proportion of loans which are going into the 60 days late status. To provide an extreme example, if all of the loans of the loan originator defaulted and went into the 60-day past due, no loan originator would be able to fulfill the buyback guarantee. So what we do when we do our due diligence, we assess the loan originator's ability to cover the buyback guarantee at current default rates and also at the significantly higher default rates. However, if defaults spike a lot, like that can happen in kind of crisis like the one we've seen since March, then some loan originators may not be able to cover the buyback guarantee. And I think the message here is that the buyback guarantee doesn't mean that that's a risk-free investment, and that's something we have been communicating to the investors all the time, that there is risk involved in Mintos investments. It's not a risk-free investment. My and many of my friends' funds in recovery are almost the same as or higher than my profit. When will Mintos start working? From the content of the question, I would suspect that this comes from one of the more recent investors, because what we see with our investors is that the situation where the amounts at risk exceed the accumulated profits is more common with the investors who joined recently. And if we look at the investors who have been investing for longer term, their accumulated profits actually mean that the amounts of risk still don't hurt the returns that much. So what this means is that it's a bit kind of a harsh conclusion, but timing does matter in making investments. And you can look at the stock market, for example. If somebody started investing in stocks in 2000, 2008, then his total return would be underwater very soon because of the corrections, sharp corrections that followed. And that's the thing with investments, and particularly the investments in riskier assets. That's a long-term game, and you need to evaluate performance over long term. And when you look at Mintos from that perspective, then as you saw from one of the previous slides, where there was the summary of the cases that are in suspension or defaulted, funds at risk at the moment is approximately 100 million euros. Definitely not an insignificant amount by any means. For the context, at the peak, the outstanding investments on Mintos was 600 million. So basically, the amount at risk is approximately 1/6 or 17% of the peak outstanding investments. And if you look at the returns that the investors have been making before defaults on Mintos, then that's been like approximately 12% a year. So basically, this amount of risk for a long-term investor is approximately 1.5 years of his profit. And if that investor has been investing, say, from 2015, then the annualized return of that person, even if we assume that everything that we are showing here and discussing in terms of the distressed cases, everything is written off, which is super pessimistic assumption, then even in that case, his annualized return would decrease to approximately 10% or so. which is still very decent return. That being said, it obviously doesn't mean that Mintos can or should do nothing with regard to the recoveries. And I guess the aim of the call is also to shed more light and transparency as to what we do in this regard. All right. Proceeding to the next general questions, can you confirm or disprove that the beneficial owner of Mintos is also the beneficial owner of Finiterra and Finko, as stated by Kristaps Mors? So UBO, or ultimate beneficial owner, is a legal term. So that means that the ultimate shareholder, private person who has at least 25% stake in the company, and it can be 25.1 up to 100%. What the UBO, let's say, kind of what in case there's the same UBO for two companies, it doesn't mean that there's just kind of one same owner. Nor does it mean that the having the same UBO is having the same key decision maker, as the decisions are still made by the management of the company. So now zooming into Mintos. Mintos was founded in 2015 by Martin Schulte and Martin Schwalters, our founders, and 4 founding angel investors. And one of those founding angel investors is by definition UBO with the stake larger than 25%, and that will also report to the local UBO register. None of the individuals actually has like a stake above 50%, so there isn't one person owning all of the Mintos. And in addition to the founders, each and every Mintos employee also owns a small stake in Mintos through employee stock options plan. So me, Mitris, but also owning a very small stake in Mintos as well. What basically kind of what the angel investors did following their exit from Ford Finance, they also invested kind of in a number of other businesses, including some lending businesses. And yes, so kind of some of the lending businesses they invested in are on Mintos, but on that we have been super transparent, and it's I mean, you can see who the angel investors are on our website. We have mentioned that in the interviews. And we have also always disclosed that to the investors in case there is some overlap of equity investors between Mintos and the loan originators. Why are loan originators allowed not COVID related to extend loans more than 180 days? Yeah, so the repurchase process for those extended loans is at the moment partly manual, because we need to check and kind of exclude the loans which have been extended by a regulatory decree. So not the cases where the loan originator has just decided as a kind of business decision to extend the loan, but that's been dictated by the moratorium that the relevant state or regulatory entity has issued. And that this kind of semi-manual process has led to a kind of a portion of loans not being repurchased on time. So we have received investors' inquiries on that, and we are working to fix this so that any loan that gets extended beyond these 180 days will be repurchased automatically, apart from extensions that arise from the debt moratoriums. So this should be implemented soon. Most of my portfolio is in recovery due to capital series, Finko, Monego, AlexCredit loans extended by months and again and again. How is this possible to happen? So the extensions, I mean, they are kind of part of the loan originator's business, and we will address this kind of technical issue where for some of the loans were extended for longer than 180 days. As for the questions on the particular cases, those we will address in a minute or so when we get to the individual cases. Are you satisfied with your performance in reclaiming your customers' money, and how do you think this influences their future willingness to invest via Mintos? Dmitry, perhaps you want to take this, given that
Sure.
you are running the show there.
Sure, thank you, Jan. Sure, I can take Greg's question. So I will split it into parts. Whether there is a satisfaction with current reclaiming or recovery process here internally, and what is our opinion, how can that influence future willingness of investors to continue working with us. Clearly, the time horizon behind any recovery process is naturally longer than the process of onboarding of a loan originator to platform, and is much longer than the process of you going to our platform and making your investment. It simply takes more time. Needless to say that if we're talking about stage number 4, where legal actions are taken, it may take years to recover. Even in the restructuring, it takes more time and effort because loan originators' financial strength must be reassessed. New terms of restructuring must be negotiated and agreed, and it also takes time. And then there is also new legal documentation that must be brought in place. And that, of course, also takes time. So, of course, this is, as I said, more lengthy than the investment process itself. What we did here at Mintos, we took our lessons learned out of the current COVID crisis. And currently, internally, we're working and considering how to strengthen our structures when we onboard the loan originator, which would then enable us to go faster and more efficient with recoveries. And that, the last what I said, we believe will influence positively investors, the investors' willingness to stay with us and to invest via Mintos.
Yeah, and just to add, our success or the kind of performance on reclaiming the customer's amount definitely does influence their future willingness to invest via Mintos. As I mean, that's in investments what you expect is certain returns, and that's our then our responsibility to ensure that. And so definitely working on that. What is the percentage expected to be recovered by a law and the timeline projected? So that's seen in the first slide, and we'll also you will see the summary for each and every case we will discuss in more detail. And that's then the question about the extensions, which I already addressed. So I think that brings us to the case-specific questions. Capital service. Dmitry, you want to take this one?
Sure, thank you. Capital Service, a Polish loan originator with outstanding exposure of over 90 million. As many other loan originators suffered badly from COVID situation, from state restrictions from basically market cap on interests and fees. And currently, with this loan originator, we're going through quite a lengthy negotiation process with ultimate goal to reach an agreement. Let me go question by question here. What are the next steps in the negotiation with Capital Service? When will the suspension of suspension lifted by the Polish government? Right. So this question is twofold. First of all, let me just walk you through where are we in terms of reaching a reasonable repayment agreement, and then I will take care of the second part because that's it's a specific legal question about government protection in COVID times. So as you remember, dear investors, some time ago we carried out a survey where we shared with you repayment conditions offered by Capital Service, which contained about 7 or 8 years amortization period with a 40% haircut, which means 40% of the debt would not be repaid, and also 2 years grace period. Grace period is when no payments are made. After that, we worked hard from both sides, Capital Service and Mintos, trying to reach an agreement. We had a meeting also in Riga in our office, and at the moment what we're discussing a structure which would not have haircut and which would not have grace period, which would allow our Capital Service to start repayments. Currently, we send term sheet to Capital Service, which we hope to be confirmed, and then we'll be able to reach a reasonable agreement in your interests. Going to the second part of the question, in summer, Capital Service took an advantage of a newly introduced protective legislative measure against creditors called simplified restructuring, or so-called COVID shield, which Capital Service entered. COVID shield will expire in mid of November. Mintos is aiming to reach a agreement with Capital Service outside of legal proceedings here. In case this is happening, then we'll have a solid restructuring going forward. Also, current Polish legislation allows for Capital Service to enter also other protective measures, like in most jurisdictions where we operate. However, the COVID shield itself is going to be over in mid-November. Capital Service, I'm going to the next question. Capital Service had direct loans and they're still collecting money and not paying them back. Will it take legal actions, or should investors file a mass lawsuit? Well, let me address this question from the end. Mintos is the sole representative of investors, and it's Mintos who acts in the interest of investors. And if any legal action is to be taken there, it is Mintos who would represent investors in those legal actions, and there is no need for investors to do it bilaterally. Basically, as per legal action as a route to recovery here in this case, we believe it's going to be quite lengthy. Any legal action is a lengthy route to recovery. It may take years. This is why this route is not preferred at the moment. We believe we're able to reach recoveries faster than via any legal route. So much about that. Let's go to the next question. Significant portion of my portfolio in recovery are related to Capital Service, Finko, Monego. What is honestly the chance of even partial recovery for these funds? I will, because this slide deals directly with Capital Service question, we will get to Monego and Finko later along our presentation. As per reaching reasonable recovery on Capital Service, as I mentioned before, this is something that both Mintos and Capital Service teams working quite hard to reach an agreement there, so that there are recoveries. What is the current status of Capital Service and Monego? Will they ever start paying back something? I think this question has already been answered here, so I go to the next one. Capital Service, how's the current status of negotiation? How big are chances whole in payments at all? I think this one was also a question. This question was covered. So my suggestion, Yanni, we go to the next slide.
All right, let's do that. AlexCredit. I think that's also the case we're covering.
AlexCredit is a Ukrainian loan originator with exposure of 4.3 million, also hit severely by COVID, by state restrictions, by lockdown, and basically it's one of the quite difficult market at the moment. I mean, Ukraine, due to economic downturn, due to many things that have been happening in that country for recent times. I go to questions now. AlexCredit, so far, not much. Nothing has been repaid. What is the status? What steps are planned? The most valuable asset AlexCredit currently has, as any other loan originator, it's its loan portfolio. Of course, in COVID times, the loan portfolio has not been performing according to their expectation of AlexCredit management, and of course to our expectation. And importantly, unfortunately, not up to your expectations, the investors. Therefore, together with the management of AlexCredit, there was a decision taken that Mintos would find a third party, which is a servicer or a collection agency that would service AlexCredit portfolio and will take over AlexCredit portfolio. AlexCredit portfolio was pledged to Mintos, and therefore this pledge, this asset, is currently in the process to be transferred to that third-party collection agencies, which is a professional market player. It's a known company in the market, and from the proceeds of those collections, this is going to be a source of recovery there. What is the status regarding AlexCredit? They're doing their business further, but didn't pay anything to Mintos investors. Well, I will not repeat myself, but as the question goes on, yes, they are operating. I wouldn't say that their performance is something that even their management can be happy at the moment, or we happy. However, this subject future recoveries will be a subject and a function of proceeds of the portfolio, which is to be taken over, not the performance of AlexCredit anymore. AlexCredit has paid back like nothing, and 6 months has already passed. How finalizing the voluntary collateral takeover of part of AlexCredit is going? Well, for takeover, you have to understand that there are 2 jurisdictions and 3 parties involved. It's quite a hard legal job to do. It's quite a intense legal process which is currently taking place. I mean, preparation of necessary documentation, agreeing on main terms, but it's reaching its final stage. I mean, the takeover of the portfolio by the third party. I think we're done with this slide.
All right, let's proceed to the next one. Akulaku. So when do you finally start to claim money back? Keyword Akulaku. Nothing has moved for months. We don't hear anything from Mintos either. So actually, Akulaku has repaid more than 6 million so far. So there's been a significant recovery. They are making I think weekly or bi-weekly payments. And we are at the moment also discussing and close to finalizing a new payment schedule. And once the ink dries on the paper, we'll inform investors about that, and that's expected to be rather soon. Status page: Akulaku repaid 571k in September, 15 mil outstanding. If Akulaku fulfills this slow plan, is it 26 more months for our money? Negotiate quicker terms. Good suggestion. That's actually what we are doing at the moment. And as mentioned, once the agreements have been signed, we'll let you know as to what's the new payment schedule is there.
A 40 Polish loan originator with exposure of about 2.2 million. What is the status and what are perspective related to a 40 payment? As you are aware, the investors, we informed you that we have chosen a legal route here, and we are in the process of enforcement with a 40. If in between there is a possibility to agree with a 40 on the way exposure is repaid, Mintos is also always open for the dialogue, and hope this will be a better alternative than continuing the enforcement. What happened with the extra collateral which was allegedly secured from a 40, and why are they given such a long time to repay the debt? The collateral is duly registered. It's parts of the company's assets, and within legal proceedings, enforcement comes to all assets of the company, including collateral.
All right. CashWagon. How about CashWagon? Is there a chance to get something back from their Vietnam business, or are they closed by the authorities permanently? So what's happening with CashWagon is that police has still sealed the company. The bank accounts are frozen, and there is investigation going on, but still no charges have been pressed, and the case hasn't been passed on to the prosecution. Given that quite some time has passed since this process was initiated, it kind of looks kind of opaque from what we see. And in parallel to this kind of ongoing saga, CashWagon has also been searching for an investor all of this time who would inject both equity and debt. Unfortunately, it seems that they have exhausted all options by now, and what's going to very likely follow is that the company will go into the liquidation route. The management of the company is very cooperative throughout all of this process and forthcoming and honest, but unfortunately, kind of a business hit like that hasn't left the company with any other options. Why CashWagon loans for Philippines and Indonesia are not recovered slowly? Is business shut down there as well completely? Yeah. So as a matter of fact, they dropped sharply their issuance in March when COVID started, as the risks associated with the issuing loans at that moment decreased significantly, and also the available funding decreased. So basically, they had been winding down their portfolio, returning the repayments to the investors. And if you look at Philippines and Indonesia, then the portfolios were almost winded down, but then Vietnam happened, and that's the kind of event that impacted their ability to wind down the portfolios entirely. CashWagon, well, when will restart to pay? How big is the risk to lose everything? So there already has been some recoveries. From the exposure suspension of 9.4 million, 2 million has been recovered. On top of that, there's certain amounts in Vietnam in the bank accounts that have been frozen. And as per our understanding, during the liquidation process, these amounts should be eventually unfrozen. But again, it's Vietnam, and the process is rather opaque. So we would expect that the recovery would end up better than 2 million. But unfortunately, there will be significant capital loss for the investors in CashWagon loans. CashWagon rating B group guarantee 3 companies: Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, headquarters in Singapore. How comes that Vietnam suspension impacts CashWagon operations in Indonesia and in Philippines? So I think of that I addressed to kind of large extent with the previous question. So basically, Philippines and Indonesia stopped issuance in COVID as risks jumped, and returned the funds to the investors. And to restart issuance there, they needed both equity and debt. And given that the search for the investor didn't materialize, I mean, you cannot jumpstart lending if you don't have the funding. So that's the unfortunate fact there. Getbucks, all right. So what's the status on the Getbucks deal? Is there an expected time for the deal? So with Getbucks, then there's two entities, or two countries, Botswana and Zambia. And so far, since the suspension, 1.4 million has been recovered, which is in line with the kind of the lower estimate that that Getbucks had agreed to during the restructuring. The larger repayments are expected to come from the asset disposals within the MyBucks group, which are ongoing but taking longer than expected. So in terms of expected time for the deal, there's kind of, at this moment, kind of limited disclosures we can provide. We would expect that in the coming quarters, there should be some larger repayments to Mintos investors that would arise from the asset sales in the group. Getbucks told to pay €1 million until 30th of September, do not see any payments from Getbucks. So there actually has been 1.4 million distributed to the principal payments distributed to the investors, and perhaps that also relates to the sequence in which the repayments are distributed. So basically, when loan originator transfers certain amounts, then the borrower repayments, which are the oldest, those are the first to be amortized and distributed to the investors, and then come the buybacks. So it's possible that for Tom there hasn't been any kind of payments that have been distributed because of the mix of the loans of Getbucks he had invested. Why Getbucks Zambia are not paying investors but act properly on other platforms? What are actually information and next steps about selling the company to SO? All right. So we are not aware of any other platforms where Getbucks Zambia would be active. I think they were kind of just trying out Viventor some long time ago, but that was with very minor amounts, and to be honest, just don't have sufficient information to comment on this. As kind of other platforms aside, the situation with Zambia is more difficult because there has been a significant currency devaluation, and also the payments from the government for the payroll loans that Getbucks has issued, they also have been recovered. So for Getbucks Zambia, we still are working on the recoveries, yet the most probabilistic or most likely route would be through the group guarantee, and would come from the asset disposals in the group rather than the operating cash flows in Zambia. Monego, Dmitry?
Sure. Thank you, Jan. I think I will take you through the general situation there, and Yanis will take care of certain questions here. So Monego, a loan originator in the liquidation process in Kosovo with current exposure just above 7 million. Here, basically, the situation is the following. As in any liquidation process, according to the law, there is administrator who is taking care of the management of the company or whatever remains from the company and coordinates payouts. Mintos is a secured creditor. Since within recent months, we've been really actively, with the help of our lawyer on ground in Kosovo, asking administrator, writing letters, meeting, and asking how much money is available for repayment and when. And the main answer from the administrator was that first, is according to current legislation and regulations, there is no obligation for him to provide such information to us. First. Second, we were also advised that currently there was a tax audit which is going on, held by one of the big four audit companies, Pricewaterhouse. And the tax audit was supposed to be finished in July this year, and reports supposed to be available. And then we were advised that it would be possible to say how much and when, which is the key question here in this case. Unfortunately, tax audit was postponed several times, and we've also received an information that several employees of PVC who were doing the audit, they got tested COVID positive, unfortunately. And that delayed the audit reports significantly. We still don't have it. We continue writing letters to administrator using our on-ground legal resource, which we have. We also have, as one of the possible lines of escalation, is to start approaching Central Bank of Kosovo. And this is something that we are also considering in case we do not reach an answer to our two main questions: how much and when. Maybe Yanni, you may want to comment and take care of those questions at the slide. Yanni, apologies, you're on mute.
All right, thanks.
This happens. This happens to the investors. This is techniques.
Yeah. So as I was saying, to recap on Monego's guarantee. So when investors were making their investments, at that moment there was no group guarantee, and when Monego license was revoked, Finiterra stepped in and committed to buy back the loans that become 60 days past due, and they made those payments. Then the liquidator or the administrator finally started transferring payments from the borrowers to the investors, and kind of since then there haven't been any further payments from Finiterra, because as Dmitry mentioned, we haven't received any data on kind of what's the actual situation with the borrowers' repayments at Monego. We have raised the issue with the liquidator, but we haven't been able yet to obtain the data. In parallel to this process, what we're doing, we're assessing the possibility then to improve the recovery via this earlier commitment of Finiterra. One has to take into account, though, that the situation since December, when they stepped in, has changed materially due to COVID and the kind of impact of COVID on borrowers' repayments worldwide has been very material. So we are working on this, and once we have more information, we will share that with the investors. What is the current status of capital service in Monego? Will they ever start paying back something? So I think these questions Dmitry addressed. Mogo will buy Finiterra. Finiterra was supposed to cover Monego loans. If not, then Mogo should do it. So the deal is not finalized or hasn't been closed yet. There's a kind of regulatory process, regulatory approval that needs to happen. And as mentioned, we are looking into the possibilities to improve the recoveries through the earlier Finiterra's commitment. Finko Ukraine, Dinero, and UkrPozyka. Why Finko was able to wind down their business in Ukraine so easily with the agreement of Mintos to suspend all loans. Other LO in Ukraine fulfill their obligation. So here I would just like to clarify that the suspension on Mintos doesn't relieve the loan originator from their obligations towards the investors the slightest bit. You can be suspended, not suspended, call it what you want to like. Each and every loan originator still has the obligations towards the investors. And the fact that the loan originator enters into a wind down process also doesn't change that the slightest bit. So yeah, I would just, in no way the wind down or the suspension implies that the loan originator has somehow relieved themselves of the obligations. As for the other LOs in Ukraine fulfilling their obligations, well, one of the customers that Dmitry was commenting on, AlexCredit, is also from Ukraine. And Ukraine has been one of the markets that has been hit the most severely by COVID, as we've seen. Finko Armenia, or Varks as it's known, when will Finko loans, which currently are in recovery, be paid back completely? So at the moment, the payment plan that Varks has in place calls for the kind of payments until end of 2022, and obviously the payments depend a lot on the borrowers' repayments. And what we've seen is that COVID is having an impact on this all across the globe, and in Armenia as well. And Armenia has been kind of rather significantly hit by COVID. On top of that, as you may have heard, there's a war in Nagorno-Karabakh going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And though it kind of may seem just as kind of a remote region, just to illustrate, some employees of Varks have actually been conscripted to the front lines. So that's just kind of an illustration that also does have an impact on the repayments. Despite this, the recoveries so far have been decent. We have been able to recover 10 million euros, and definitely working to improve those further. Why didn't Finko Group Guarantee apply for Varks? When is it estimated to receive funds in recovery from Varks? So Finko Group Guarantee applies. Nobody has cancelled that. And the group guarantee means that Finko Group guarantees the obligations of Varks with all of the assets that Finko Group has. What are those assets? Well, those assets are shares of other lending businesses in Finko Group. All of the lending businesses have been hit hard by COVID. So enforcing the guarantee, which like litigating and going to stage 4 in our process, would not help Varks recoveries because there's very little kind of extra cash you can squeeze out of the other businesses. And actually that would significantly impair repayments to the investors who have invested in loans issued by other Finko Group companies. So there's just kind of wasn't any benefit for the investors from really kind of litigating and going after the assets of the other businesses in the group. Finko has the same owners. Would Mintos cashback campaign for Varks started after notice from Armenian Central Bank? Now funds are at risk. Will Mintos pay Finko debts? So cashback campaign was announced on March 16th, and that was valid until March 29th. The license was revoked on March 24th. So the cashback was announced before any announcements by the central bank, and neither Varks or Finko management was aware of the plans by the central bank to revoke the license. And also Mintos wasn't aware of any kind of developments like that. Finko's Armenia loans are disgraceful. It's been more than half a year for recovery. We need answers and solution. It was buyback guarantee loan and nothing. Yeah, so this I think relates to the buyback guarantee, which I addressed earlier in the session. Buyback guarantee doesn't mean it's a risk-free investment. It just means that the loan commits to buy back loans which go into default. But if a kind of huge amount of loans go into default, then the loaner is just not capable of executing that buyback guarantee. And if you kind of look at the composition of current exposure that investors have towards Varks loans, then you would see that a very large proportion of the exposure or pending principal is buybacks. What that means is that a very large portion of loans in Varks portfolio are late and have been restructured. So there's kind of significant difficulties with the borrowers are having with their repayments. Despite that, as mentioned, solid recoveries so far, 10 million recovered, and working to bring that further up. All right, that's actually the last individual slide that we had compiled the night before. We still have 5 or 6 minutes, so I think we can go to Slido and go through the other questions which we have there and address those.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good idea. Let's use that time to address those questions which we didn't address in the slides.
All right. The significant portion of my portfolio is in recovery related to capital service, Finko, and Monego. What is honestly the chance of even partial recovery for these funds? That we addressed, I think, kind of through the individual slides on each of those cases. Finko's Armenia, and I just upvoted the question. The question about Finko Armenia that we answered. Main interest by my side is Akulaku, Indonesia, and Monego, Kosovo. These and others were invested automatically by Invest and Access in a very disproportional way. Yeah, so the way Invest and Access works, it kind of looks at the way at the proportion of particular loan originators' loans in the total outstanding investments, and as a part of the available loan supply. And Akulaku, as you also see from the recovery slides, they are relatively large loan originators, so the weight of that originator could be larger in the portfolios of investors. I'm not sure whether that should be a very disproportional, but yeah. I have a very good math question. Invested 10,000 euros, 250 euros to lower interest than 10%, and 9,750 to higher interest than 16.1. How could I get 14.71 interest? Could be related to, let's say, grace period that the loan originators apply to their borrowers. So let's say if the borrower is late just a kind of a handful of days, then the loan originator doesn't charge any interest or penalties for those kind of couple of late days. So that might bring the actual return somewhat lower than the gross return. What is the situation with Mogo, who has rating A? I have almost 1,000 euros and growing late, starting from 15 days. Are we getting more interest on these delays? So speaking of ratings, as you may have seen, we are now coming out with a new system, Mintos scores, which will be more detailed and will provide you with more transparency as to how we perceive certain aspects of the loans and the loan originators. And I think those Mintos scores will go out any day now. So definitely keep kind of follow Mintos, and then you will see also kind of what the scores for 1,000 euros in late, starting from 15 days. So I guess that doesn't say much, because I would have to see the total investments in Mogo and also the proportion in the investors' portfolio. Are we getting more? For example, if let's say there's 70 million euros of Mogo loans outstanding and 1,000 euro of loans are 15 days late, that's just kind of tiny proportion out of the total portfolio. Are we getting more interest on these delays? So that does depend on the setup the Mogo has with their borrowers. If there is a late interest or late payment fee, then that also applies to the Mintos investors, and Mintos investors get a share of that late interest. Akulaku and Getbucks automatically invested by Mintos in my Invest in Access account. No cashback for many weeks as promised. So about the automatic investment, well, that is the idea of diversification. Let's say if someone invests in ETF, which then allocates investments in let's say S&P 500 or DAX 30, which is the German index, that investor is exposed to the constituents of that index. So let's say someone who invested in ducks was also exposed to Wirecard just plummeting in terms of their value and being kind of eventually liquidated. So that's the kind of you take kind of these individual risks even if you are investing in a diversified portfolio. All right, it's 2 o'clock here in Riga, so I think that wraps up our call. Thanks a lot for joining in. We do hope you found the call useful. If you have any feedback or suggestions, please do send that to us, to our investor services team. We'll be very happy to take that and factor into the kind of the further events or calls we could do. So thanks a lot again, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.